Here is the ring back in place. It's been cleaned. All I've done is remove all the grease and rubbish from it. Look how quickly that flicks back into position now. And that's all because these broad flat surfaces were sticky with oil and grease, and it just caused this thing to move very slowly as a result, which meant that the mechanism didn't really stand a chance of working properly. Well, with this ring back in place, lubricated lightly with some graphite powder, that moves very nicely now. I'm quite pleased with that. You can see that I've got the brass piece here and the two balls sitting in place. Now that's pretty much packed with grease. The grease is holding everything in position. This piece can go on the front of the camera now. If I can get it in the right position. That's held in with 3 screws from the back. 3 long black screws. In this case, the ones with the chewed up heads, because somebody's had a go at these sometime in the past. But that shouldn't cause me a problem. I think I can get the screws done up tight enough, and I don't know that it's worth doing anything in the way of painting some matte black paint on there to try and pretty it up. I don't think it'll achieve anything. It may be useful just to lock those screws in place in case they're inclined to come loose. Just make sure I haven't displaced those balls. No, they look like they're still there. At the front, what have we got? Well, we've got this chrome ring, which will couple to this, and this brass ring, which goes inside like that. Goes inside like that. Full. Okay, the chrome ring can go on there. The thread here, that's our focus helical. I'm going to put some helical grease on there. It doesn't need anything particularly thick or sticky. It should run quite smoothly, but it is quite a large area of thread, and it will provide quite a bit of resistance if you use thick grease. So where's my helical grease? Helimax XP is the stuff I'm going to use. So I'll just apply some in half a dozen spots around that thread. And it'll distribute itself in there just fine. Seems a bit reluctant to pick up that thread. Might be one edge of it burred over or something. I'll have to work on this. Back shortly. Well, I can certainly get it to start and run, but it's quite stiff. So I'm going to take that front ring off and wash this piece and the other piece very carefully. There may be something in the thread. I've already done that once and those parts did mate up correctly and seem to move smoothly. But now they don't want to. Oh well, I'll just work on this. There is another possibility that's just occurred to me, and it may be that something is distorted, and when I did the 3 screws up it pulled things up tight. Did that really... That's moving freely enough there, but there's obviously something sticking it up, so I'll clean the thread on here and have another go. Well, as you can see, that turns smoothly now. What was the secret? Well, multiple things. The threads were clogged up still with grease, even though I'd cleaned them, there was stuff still stuck in there, hardened grease. This ring is slightly distorted. Most likely the camera has been dropped at some stage and the focus ring has hit the ground. And so this is, if you squeeze it in one direction, it moves very, very freely. If you squeeze it in the other direction between finger and thumb, it binds up. So there's obviously some distortion in this outer ring. So what have I done with that? Well, not an awful lot, to tell the truth. To make sure that there are no rough spots in the thread, I used some Brasso metal polish in here and worked it backwards and forwards. And then I took these 2 pieces away, cleaned them in the ultrasonic cleaner, got them absolutely clean, and now I just need to put a bit of helical grease in here. Of course it'll help if I put this piece back in first, and reassemble it. That's worked in, that's moving nice and smoothly now. Of course it's a bit greasy so I can't get a grip on it anymore. That'll do nicely. This chrome trim around the outside is what holds to the focus scale ring here on the shutter. Alright, well with that piece in, put these other pieces on the back of the camera now. This lever, this sits in here, pivots on that point, and it triggers this lever, which triggers the shutter, and this is triggered by this lever here, which is released from the top of the camera. I'll just put a quick wipe of molybdenum paste through there. Get its fixing screw in place. And tighten that up. Here's the lever that releases that. That sits that way up. I'll run a quick wipe of molybdenum paste through those two areas there, and a very light wipe on that surface, taking off most of that. Here's our return spring. Now our flash wire here is rubbing on that. That looks good. Moves smoothly. We have a spring which goes here, and a shoulder screw that runs through it. If I've got that spring on upside down, I have. That spring appears to be trapped. That's better. The arm at this point, there's a spacer washer under that, and because when I looked at this arm it seemed to flap about a lot, I'm going to put another shim under there as well, a very fine one, to take up some of that slack. It may be that the pivot screw has been over tightened and has lost some of its edge. very light white molybdenum paste through that pivot point. And fit the spring into place on the top of that arm. Tiny groove in the top of that nickel plated arm. That's it. And that's all moving nicely and freely. What are we missing here? Well, a piece of leatherette fell off the front. And here we have the buffer pad that sat there for the mirror. Now that has taken an awful lot of cleaning to get it to that stage. It's a piece of leather. Quite matte, almost like suede. That was black. It was black with grease. Because it's not supposed to have oil or grease getting near the surface of the mirror. So I've had to clean that with multiple cleanings with acetone and other solvents, and pressing it between pieces of tissue until all the filth came out. But I can glue that back in place now. It just needs to go into this position here, and it's just so that the mirror doesn't come up with a loud clack. It's still fairly noisy, but it won't be quite as bad. More modern cameras, of course, have a piece of foam rubber of some sort there, which typically break down about 5 minutes after you buy the camera to a sticky mess. Where at least this, in 60 years, hasn't broken down, it's still good. Alright, now I've put the shutter back on the front of this to demonstrate how this mechanism works. I'll put a piece of paper under here so you can see when things are happening. So if we cock the shutter, this is what the cocking rack would normally do. The shutter release would release here, so we've got the shutters open for viewing. You can see that. The shutter release button acts on this lever, and you see that the shutter blades immediately close. The mirror comes up, the capping plate comes up, and the capping plate strikes this lever and the shutter fires. So we'll do that again. I'll set a slower shutter speed. What have I got it set to? Set it to a second. Let's go all the way. So the shutter closes, mirror capping plate comes up, you'll see the shutter opens and closes for the exposure. Now interestingly, we had problems with the shutter on this camera to start off with. It worked very unreliably. With the controls on the back of the shutter here all cleaned and lubricated appropriately, that shutter's now working quite well. I think I'll put this back on the camera body and test the shutter and see how it's behaving. It may well be that there are no faults now, that the fault really lay here and not in the shutter itself. Of course, I'm not going to stop there. I'm going to tear the shutter down and service it anyway, but it's worth finding out how this behaves on the camera, I think. Sometimes you just back the wrong horse. This is the one we've been working with. This is the mirror. This is another one. There's not enough lift in this mirror to lift the trigger, which allows the shutter action to continue. That wasn't the only Odd thing about it, of course, the edge of the mirror tray here had been chewed away, ground away. I don't know why. There was something else. A screw here which controls the release of the capping plate was missing. But the killer with this one is the lack of power with the mirror. It's just too lackluster. The mirror does get out of the way, but it doesn't get out of the way sufficiently quickly to lift this trigger reliably, which in turn releases the shutter. So, this is another parts body. It has a good action, and I've tested it with the same shutter. It works wonderfully well. This one, I don't think I can do anything useful with that unless I replace the whole mirror tray and its springs. I've already mentioned that's a terrible task. Since I have another body here, I'll use this one instead. I don't like mystery problems that I can't get on top of. This is the original camera body. The shutter's back in it and it's working correctly. There was a secret. There were sort of multiple facets to the secret, and we'll go through it. This is the capping plate. It's latched down with its main latch down here. When you release the shutter, that main latch releases. But the capping plate, if the mirror's partly down, the capping plate is held in place because this lever here has got a little tab on it. And if the mirror's slightly down, that little tab locks the capping plate down on that side. Now, on the camera I've been repairing, while I had the shutter out and I was working on those front parts, I had a look down here and I noticed that that tab wasn't holding that plate down. In fact, it wouldn't go all the way down. It was catching on that tab and it didn't lock it down at all. So it meant that the pressure plate was following the mirror up immediately afterwards when the shutter was released, and that's how the mechanism managed to work. There were clues. So that tab there, I just had to push that down a bit, and then this lever would lock it down correctly. And I didn't think any more about it, and I assembled the shutter back into the camera body, and at that stage the shutter wouldn't work properly. This little screw here, that screw was missing on the camera I've been working on. Somebody had taken that out completely. That controls the timing of that action for that catch. So we know something odd had gone on down there, and this was the clue that this catch previously didn't work, but it allowed the shutter to function. But once I'd got this working again, the shutter wouldn't go. And so there was some secret there, and we seemed to have a lack of oomph on the mirror. Well, the reason we had a lack of oomph on the mirror is that when the mirror is rising, it's also stretching out this little tiny spring. And the spring that was in the camera wasn't the correct spring. I'll remove this one from this parts body and show you what we've got. This one is the proper one for the camera. This was what's installed instead. You can see it's a larger diameter spring. It's also a much heavier wire. And that was the secret. The spring raising the mirror had to also act on this spring, and the amount of tension required to stretch that out was just too high, and that's why the mirror came up so slowly. So whoever had been in the camera and butchered the corner of the mirror tray had replaced this spring. Perhaps they lost the original, perhaps they thought the original lacked enough power and they needed a more powerful one. But this spring, that's not the right one. And that was the secret of the problem. So what we have back in the camera body is that our correct spring was back in place, and this catch was arranged so that it did lock off the capping plate as it should do, and that left me with a working camera body again. So that little mystery, very annoying, things like that. I don't like it when things just don't work. Originally I thought that this mirror just lacked sufficient power in its return springs, but I looked and compared it with the springs that I see in these bodies, and it all looked like the spring was in the same place, and there was no practical way that you could stress those springs in order to make them lose their effective tension. And that's what eventually led me to find this problem instead. So with the shutter all working, I'm going to take the shutter back off the body now and service the shutter itself. So we have our 4 screws here. I could remove the whole front of the camera, but this was the way I was originally going to take the shutter off, to show you that the shutter could be serviced by itself, but that I don't advise doing that. So here's our shutter free. Here's our flash contact, a little cocking action there. I'll put the body to one side. We'll be coming back to that. And the shutter itself. So we have all this front ring needs to be checked and looked at and make sure it's good. Seems to move smoothly enough. The lenses can be removed. It's not as easy to get a grip on the rear group on one of the reflexes as it is on the Retina IIc, for example. That's because the mount is a different shape. On a 3C, the mount comes right up to here. It comes up past the edge of the glass, right up to here. On a reflex, if you had that, that would catch the mirror, which is why you can transplant the lenses from the reflex to a 3C, but you can't transplant the lens from a 3C to a reflex, not successfully. I'll put the lenses away. Back to the shutter itself. This is clean enough looking. Getting this retaining ring off on a reflex is very difficult. Remove this stuff from the back if we can. Right, so this retaining ring here is what I'm talking about. They are very difficult to remove. Part of the reason is that they go, the recess they drop into on the back of this outer case appears to be slightly tapered, so that as they lock down, they lock into that taper. But for whatever reason, they are very, very difficult to get out. This one, I can see by the scarring here and on the ring itself, that someone's had a fight with that previously. And that might mean it'll be easy to get off, or it might mean it'll be very difficult. Well, one of my retaining ring tools would engage with that, and it wasn't tight. This is the one I'll normally use, but it won't fit over the back of the shutter here. There's not enough space. Anyway, I've got this loose, as I say, so I can spin that off. I don't think I have any spares for this retaining ring, and that's because so many get damaged in the process of removal that all the spares get eaten up. You can see it's a different retaining ring than those you'd see on a 3C type. Our flash contact has passed through here and just sort of bent up, so we can leave that back out of the way. From the front of the shutter, 3 small screws hold this ring in place. They're chrome plated, easily damaged, and being very small, they're easily lost. You can get into the front of the shutter on one of these reflexes. While it's on the camera, but of course you can't do an awful lot from the front except make a few adjustments really. This whole shroud here comes off. This lens mount is also fixed to this shroud or case. You can take that off first if you like, or leave it on. We'll remove it. And that lens mount will come off, and there's the shield underneath it. You can't get into the shutter yet with this outer piece in place, and this is held in place with small screws, 4 I think from memory. I noticed something odd about this shutter. The B setting didn't seem to work. The blades didn't want to close again after you've removed your hand from the shutter release. And I don't know where that problem lies, so I've got a suspicion. Okay, so here's the shutter. At the back of the shutter we have the control stuff that opens the aperture blades to full aperture when you cock the shutter for viewing, and also opens the shutter for viewing. And these actions are independent to the cocking of the shutter, which takes place through the main cam here. Let's remove these springs. Take note of how they fit. those springs act to close the blades. From the front, let's remove the front retaining ring and the speed settings cam plate. This is the pinion, this is where the shutter's cocked. It's also what works the main cam here, cocks that. Remove this catch, remove that. And I'm just looking at this lever to see if it'll lift the B lever out of engagement. It appears to. I'll cock the shutter and see how that B action works. Of course that'll be down. No, that's certainly lifted out without any problems. That's good. And that shutter sounded pretty good to me. Let's have a look at the main spring. It feels like it has plenty of tension. Let's have a look at it. That main cam is a bit stiff. No, it's not bad as these things go. That's quite good. If you take that as your 12 o'clock, that's at 2. That's as good as you're ever likely to find. And the main cam felt a bit sticky. Alright, well I'll strip the shutter down, service this, and then put it all back together. This is the retard gear train, and that screw is a little bit loose. Self-timer. Let's remove this catch, unhook that spring. That spring looks a bit lackluster. Yeah, I think that needs some attention. Flash contact. It's a bit sluggish. That's the shutter release lever there. Let's have this spring off for here. Take the pallet wheel off. The B lever here, held in by that screw. I have a screwdriver made to do that job. The B lever off, and the B lever spring, which I really want that off that post because I'm liable to damage it otherwise. Well, that was good. It was there 1 second and it was gone the next. Well, I'll be hunting for that. This little spring. That one I didn't let get away. Flipping the shutter over. I'll get these screws out the back. Note this screw is taller than its two mates. One of the springs on the back of the shutter connects to that. Note its position, it's next to another hole. And 3 screws hold the mechanism plate into the case. So here's the case. The diaphragm blades are in the case. They look quite clean, but we have them out to clean them anyway. Here's our shutter blades, and they're on this extra plate. And this extra plate is what allows the blades to sit in the open position, or they can be in the closed position like that. And if the blade actuating ring moves, they can be open even with this in the park position. Let's lift that plate off complete with its blades. And the mechanism plate doesn't look dissimilar really to any other one that you're used to dealing with, except of course we don't have our fixed pivot for the blades because they are on this plate. So 3 screws hold the lens tube to the mechanism plate, and the lens tube holds the blade actuating ring in position. And all of these parts are quite clean, which probably means that the camera did virtually no work after whoever had serviced it had finished with it, because possibly it didn't work very well after that. Okay, that's looking quite good. I'm just left with the mystery of where that spring went to. And remove the diaphragm blades from the case. 3 retaining screws. Very small, which means they're easily stripped out if you over tighten them. Here's the retaining plate. See, we've got 5 blades. And the blades are very much the same as you'd see on a 3C, slightly different shape I think. Here's the moving plate that sets the blade, swings them in and out. So all these parts I've got on the bench now, I can clean these up and get ready for reassembly.